She's going to be preaching with me, and Sherry Fairburn. And she also helps me with our middle school youth group, which is kind of like a confirmation on steroids. The kids seem to love it. They still come back. But, it's great because, one, it's in that middle school. Confirmation is just that. You're confirming that the covenant that we just made at baptism takes place. We do take this covenant very seriously. It's like our purpose here at the community church. It's to make disciples of Jesus Christ. And we take that seriously because we indeed want to help you grow. And that's why we're doing this sermon series. It's called Focus. Oh, okay, kids. Pastor Bill kept on going. So his kids is taking place. So if there's any kids over here that want to go down, eventually little Caleb can go down. As they go out in a herd. No, we take our kids very seriously here at the community church. What we're doing today is we're talking about focus. Because, the truth is, we live in a world that, you need that focus if you want to make it through life. Have you ever had it that you walked into a room to get something, and as soon as you got into the room, you forgot what you're going for? I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll walk around thinking I'll figure it out, then I'll walk out of the room and come back in hoping it'll reset something, but it doesn't. And I have some people that are pointing toward this in life. We wander. We kind of aimlessly move around. And the truth is that in life, our world, it really is loud and divided. The reason that we're having this new sermon series called Focus is because it's learning how to live as salt and light in a world that feels chaotic and divided, where people feel angry and everybody seems to be choosing sides. But one of the things God calls us to do is to live counterculturally. We're to live differently. We're not supposed to live like the rest of the world. God is calling us to live as a grounded, gracious, focused, loving people that don't lose what we believe. So over the next 6 weeks, we're going to be learning biblical principles that can help us live by faith. So the reason this is important is because we need to learn how we can live not by reacting to everything coming at us, but learn to live with clarity and purpose so that you're not walking into the other room figuring out, what is it that I was coming for? See, this series is going to be about learning to live life as God sees it. Not that we're drifting around or constantly trying to put out fires, but living in a way that's rooted in Scripture, in the biblical promises of God, and practical for everyday living. See, the goal is moving away from this fear-driven, reactionary life to a faith-driven clarity. See, and this is one of the hopes of with baptism is that with little Caleb, wouldn't it be wonderful if from the very beginning he can learn to live not by fear, not by anxiety, not by worry, not by all the pressures of the world around him, but to live with clarity and focus and trusting God, knowing that God has a plan and a purpose for him. So I want to begin by helping us think clearly about something that quietly is shaping every part of our life. And it happens whether we realize it or not. And what the idea is vision. It's focus. Today we're going to talk about how God has a vision for our lives. God has a focus for your life and mine. Because until we understand that truth, that reality, it's very difficult for us to live with clarity and purpose and confidence. There's one time where the Apostle Paul, it's in the book of Acts. He's standing before the king, King Herod Agrippa, and he's telling the story about how Jesus had transformed his life. And Paul, he went from someone who was actively persecuting Christians. He was killing people. He was breaking up families. He was throwing them into prison. And then he was transformed into a man who gave his life to spreading the message of Christ, spreading God's love. And that kind of transformation, it doesn't happen randomly. It doesn't happen overnight. But it does happen because God gave that person a vision and they chose to follow it. At the end of his testimony, you know what Paul did? He said something that gives both faith, and it's pretty heavy. It's simple, but it's deep. He says, I've not been disobedient to the vision God gave me. You know, when you hear that, it kind of forces you and I to pause, think a minute, and look at our own life. Because that's the goal. Not just to get through life. You know, God doesn't want us to just make it to the end and then it's over. God doesn't want us to, he who has the most toys wins. God doesn't want us to be successful like the world describes. The goal God has for you is to be able to, at the end of your life, to say, yes, I followed what God put in front of me. I lived that focused life. I experienced that power, that victory, that hope, that destiny that God had for me. But see, here's the challenge. Even with a little baby and a baptized child, we have a challenge. You cannot follow a vision you can't clearly see. If what you see is blurry, your steps are going to be uncertain. You know, the truth is, I'm starting to get cataracts. For those of you who have cataracts, you know what it's like. It starts getting kind of blurry, especially if there's light in the background. And you can't see things as clearly as you used to. You don't see colors like you used to. And sometimes things get a little blurry. And that gets unsettling. And if your vision is blurry, your steps are blurry. So what I want us to do is to take a look at some reasons as to why vision is important, why vision matters. Now, if you look in your sermon notes, you're going to find, if you look in your bulletin, you're going to find sermon notes. We also have an app for the church. Sermon notes are on the app. For those of you who are watching on the live stream, it's great having you with us. You can get the app. If you don't have it already, you can get it on Google or the Apple stores under Community Church Waterford. And if we're in the church, you can either use the app or the bulletin, but we're going to look at some points, some reasons why vision matters so much. So let's take a look at number one, the first reason vision matters, and that's because of this. Without vision, life begins to unravel. Without vision, life begins to unravel. In Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18, it says, where there's no vision, people perish. And that's the truth. But, perish doesn't always mean something immediate and drastic. It can also mean something slowly drifting away, something that's slowly falling apart, slowly losing direction over time. And when you don't have vision, life starts to drift. And you start to feel it in a few different places. One, when you start drifting, you're going to feel it in your decisions because you're not really going to know where you're going, and even the simple choices are going to get hard. You start to second guess yourself. You ever notice that? When you really don't know where you're going, you start to procrastinate and hesitate, and you go back and forth. Instead of moving forward, you feel stuck. It's like you're not getting to where you feel you need to go. The book of James calls that being double-minded or unstable. Not because you're incapable, but because you're lacking direction. And it's like you just can't get traction, like you're stuck on ice. And another way this impacts our life is that when we don't have vision, it starts to mess with our relationships. Think about it, our relationships. When there's no shared vision, people naturally start going off in different directions. Doesn't matter whether it's a friendship, whether it's a relationship, whether it's at work, at church, in the community. Where there's no vision, there's going to be frustration and confusion, and division shows up. Vision and focus, that's what keeps people aligned. Without it, even good people end up working against each other. And over time, you know what happens? Things start to break down. Relationships start to break down. Life starts to feel like one problem after another, one struggle after another. You have stress in your relationships, in your finances. You'll have emotional burnout. And it seems like you're always reacting. You're always trying to put out fires. You're always trying to recover. And you just never seem to get any traction to move forward. And that's what happens when vision is missing. And it doesn't stay in one area. It spreads and spills into everything in your life. So, Sherry, you want to come on up here? I asked Sherry to help me preach for a little bit today, for a couple reasons. What?
Did you have to use the P word?
What, preach?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did, just because I wanted to see the look on your face.
Oh, thanks. Okay.
Yes, I will. I just wanted to make you sweat a little.
Oh, thanks.
You're so
Dale,
comfortable
you're
first
next.
time. Okay, so what does it actually look like when your faith has direction, where you start to have a destiny, and you're not living by just good intentions, you're living by faith and focus?
Well, you know me, and Dale knows me, and I guess I'm going to answer your question by asking a question to everyone. Does part of your current vision that you have, is part of it, do you desire to strengthen your walk with God, your relationship with God? Because our middle schoolers know, I'm sorry, I learned it with the middle schoolers. Over our sanctuary, it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul and strength, and then love your neighbors as yourself. And my question to you is, how are you currently showing that this is your desire? A verse keeps coming up again and again, and Pastor Dave says, well, why do you think that is? It's Hebrews 10:24, and it says, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Well, you know what spur means. It really, really means to strongly, well, kick you in the butt. Encourage you to keep moving forward in your Christian walk. So, of course, I immediately questioned, since our faith walk is personal, it's a personal thing, why do I have the right to spur anybody on? It's not my business. And I did some studying, and the answer is because of love. Oh, that's a pat answer. If we really love our fellow believers, our brothers and sisters in the church, shouldn't we encourage them and each other to grow in Christ through discipleship and service? And sorry, I think I have to say something else right now. For those of you that are new to our church, my heart is just saying, I challenge, we are not, we sang the songs and I was thinking, oh man, I wonder if they just think that we have no issues or troubles. Get to know us, challenge to find out I was going to use crap, but I don't know if I should use crap on the stage, so I'm going to say garbage, but too late. We have all this garbage in our lives. Get to know the people in the church and challenge them and find out, oh my word, you went through that and you came out still believing in God? What the heck is that about? I challenge you, because I did it, and the stories I learned. So I felt someone needed to hear that, so there it is. What I want to share about is a brand new ministry that we have supported as a community church, and I want to thank you all for supporting us. You were so generous last year when you gave during the Christmas season to Royal Family Kids Ministry, and we are your M&M offering today. Well, see all those good-looking young people in the back? Wave to the people. There you go. We are representing Royal Kids Family Camp, Teen Life Adventure Camp, Mentoring Club, and Teen Life. These ministries serve children and teens in foster care who have experienced abuse and neglect. And when I saw little Caleb, and I think of my grandkids, they are loved. Our kids that we work with didn't have that. They don't even know they didn't have it. So that's what our ministry is about. Ideally, our vision, our focus, is to get into these kids' lives, God willing, at age 7 and love them to 18 and beyond. And then we'll bring them back into the fold. We'll get them to serve. We'll get them to have children. No, I'm okay. It's your turn now.
Well, and that getting freed from stuff, you're talking about how we're not a perfect people here. You won't find perfect people anywhere. But getting freed from that junk, that stuff that hurt us in life, what's the name of that word, of that process of getting freed?
What is it, Hunter? Sanctification.
He got it. I knew he got it. And, But that's something that this church is good on spurring
It
people
is.
on towards. And, sometimes when we think of things like a vision, that it's kind of far off, and, even how God may want to free us, that it's really far off, where actually it's a lot closer than we think. So if God, part of God's vision isn't far off, but it's real close by, what would that look like? What would it look like if that opportunity God has for you is like right in front of you? What does that look like?
I often hear believers in my Bible studies and just talking, they say, hey, God, I wish you would show me my purpose in life. And I think that we often are waiting for that big Esther moment. We're waiting for that purpose where God says, this was what you were created for. But what if it's right here in front of you? Over 20 years ago, a man who was obedient to a God-given vision, he really had a vision and a dream. He felt that and he's from California, so no judgment. He felt called by God to create a place where children in foster care could experience the love of Christ. And at the same time, be kids, because they often don't get to be kids. We provide a fun-filled week with children where they can learn about and experience the love of Jesus through intentional activities from Christ-centered counselors and staff.
Cool.
It is.
All right, so what do you think it would look like if we stopped drifting, and what could be one tangible step we could make into God's vision in this next week?
Oh, mama. Here we go. One real step, and this is an easy step, and you could get your toe wet. You could sponsor a camper, and that would be wonderful, because we bring the camps we go to charge us to bring the kids to camp. So you could sponsor a camper, but you could take another important step, and this is really kind of, getting out of your comfort zone. You could give of your time, and that really impacts a child's life. They're going, you like me enough to come and spend time with me? And they may be really disruptive because they don't believe that that you would do that. Wow. And I've been in it 12 years, and just be careful, it hooks you. And here's the beautiful thing about our organization in this area. We have all ages of volunteers. So those good-looking people at the back, they could all be my children. Okay, some of them. No, they could all be my children. But look at me. I'm not 18 anymore. And, okay, I know I look it. But you guys, every age, even if you're 93, you could have a service with this organization, and I see people of all ages. How can you serve? You can serve directly with the children. And if you say, oh, well, kids really aren't my thing. Oh, but there's more. You can serve behind the scenes, because we need people to support what we do. You can volunteer as a family if your kids are a little older. If you want to get your child involved in service, talk to me. Or you can even talk a friend into saying, hey, or a husband, come on, let's go do this. Let's try it out. Because we want each child to have someone fully focused on them, we have a one-to-one pairing. One adult, one child. It takes a lot of volunteers. So, I am spurring you on. Talk to us after church. We have chocolate. And dare us to find a place for you to serve.
Now, you didn't tell me you're going to bribe.
We have chocolate.
And also, you do the middle school youth group with me.
I do.
And do you have fun?
Unfortunately, I have so much fun.
Hunt, I heard you. Do you have fun? Hunt and Colton, do you guys have fun?
It is really cool. Thank you, those with middle school kids, for sharing them, for daring to share them with us.
Yeah, but see, when you start going into God's vision, you start to get a satisfaction and fulfillment you don't get anywhere either, too. So I do invite you to talk to her after the service and the rest of her team. It's really an awesome experience. Now let's take a look at another reason why vision is so important. All right, let's take a look at number 2. If you go in your sermon notes, number 2. See, what you focus on, it shapes how you live. Do you know that? What you focus on, it shapes how you live. Jesus gets right to this in Gospel of Matthew chapter 6. He says that your eyes are the lamp of your body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole life is going to fill with light. If your vision is off, everything feels dark. See, what Jesus is saying, it's real simple. how you see things shapes how you live. I mean, especially when you have like little Caleb there, if you can start shaping how his perspective is in life, how he sees things, that's going to make such a powerful impact on his life. It works for all of us. Do you know that two people can see the same thing and see it totally differently? That's like when police come to an accident. If everybody has the same perspective and they see the accident the same way, they think there's a problem. They think that everybody was talking. They're looking for stories to be different because everybody has a different perspective. You can have two people, they'll experience the very same situation. They'll see the same facts and walk away with totally different conclusions because they're looking through different lenses, different perspectives. So the real issue isn't what's happening around you. You know that? The real issue isn't what's happening around you. It's how you see it. It's how you are seeing it. So are you going through life seeing everything through fear or seeing everything through faith? That's really powerful. I'm going to give you a story. Now, this is going to the book of Numbers, Old Testament, chapters 13 and 14. I'm not going to read both chapters for you, so I encourage you to read it when you get home. It's really fascinating. It's the story where God had just rescued the Israelites out of slavery, and he brought them right to the edge of the promised land. This is after they got the 10 Commandments and everything. And he has them right to the edge of where there's a future for the Israelites. But before they went in, God had Moses do a test. He sent 12 men, 12 spies in to check out the land of milk and honey, the promised land. Now, this wasn't just about gathering intel. This was about helping the people see what was ahead of them. Because you can't step into future if you can't picture the future. Does that make sense? You can't step into something with confidence if you can't see it. So the spies went in, 12 spies, 40 days. They were exploring. They're checking everything out. They come back, and the evidence was undeniable. The land was incredible. I mean, it was so fruitful. You'd have two guys carrying grapes on a pole to carry them all, okay? There was no question. The opportunity was real. God's blessing was right at their fingertips. And still the response was split. You know why? Take a look in your sermon notes. Look at number 3. Because fear begins by focusing on the negative. And that's how fear grows, focusing on the negative. See, 10 of the 12 spies, they came back and they agreed, yeah, the land is good. But you know what? They could only see the problems. They could only see the challenges. They began talking about the size of the people. There's giants in that land. There's giant cities. There's giant armies. You know, all they saw were all the problems that laid ahead. And that's how fear works. It doesn't deny what's good, but it shifts your focus away from what's good and what's towards threatening. And we're not saying that you ignore the threatening, but you see, over time, the focus grows stronger on what you're focusing on. And the problem feels like it's bigger than it really is. And the promise that God gives you gets smaller. It feels like it's shrinking. You know, finish this saying for me. You make a mountain out of a molehill, right? And we do that. Fear causes us to do that. And when you live that way, when you're focusing on the negative, your perspective becomes focused on everything that can go wrong. Even when there's evidence and proof of God's provision, God's power, God's grace, God's promises, your attention focuses on the risk instead of the opportunity. Look at number 4. Here's a fourth reason that vision is so important, because you know what? When you're focused on fear, fear reshapes your thinking into scarcity. I'm a strong believer in scarcity and abundance. Now, I'm not thinking, well, if I believe that I'm going to have $500 million, a Maserati, and a mansion, I'm going to get it. It doesn't work that way, okay? I do believe, though, that you can focus on scarcity or you can focus on abundance. Abundance is coming from God. And you see, Fear is reshaping your thinking into the scarcity. As the report of the spies continued, the mindset of the spies became clearer. They began to act as though there was no place for them in the promised land. They were acting and believing as though everything had been taken. There was no room, no spot for them. The land has been described as a promised land, but it was now out of reach, according to the 10 spies. See, that's what a scarcity mindset does. Scarcity, it convinces you that there's never enough. The pie is shrinking. There's not enough pieces. There's not enough opportunity. There's not enough provision. There's not enough space. It creates this anxiety inside of you, and it causes you to start doing one of the most destructive things you could ever do. You start comparing yourself to other people. Don't ever let Caleb compare himself to anybody else. You have him just focus on that identity that God gave him. See, that fear, it creates this anxiety that causes us to compare ourselves with others, and it starts to question what God promised and makes you wonder, is there anything left for me? So instead of trusting that God is able, instead of trusting in God's promises and his ability to provide, we start to feel like we're competing for something that's limited and scarce. See, that's why fear reshapes your thinking into scarcity. But here, look at number 5. You know what else? Fear does this. It distorts your identity. Fear distorts your identity. See, when the spies said something that really, it reveals a deeper issue. They said they felt like grasshoppers in their own eyes. That when they looked at the people around them, they felt small and insignificant. There's giants in there. There's giant people. There's giant armies. There's giant cities. See, what that did is it showed the real problem. The real problem wasn't what they saw. It's what they thought they saw around them. It showed really what they believed about themselves, that they were small and insignificant. See, fear reshaped their identity. You know, when fear takes a hold of us, it changes what we see when we look in the mirror. It causes us to underestimate what God has placed inside of us. It convinces us that, we're smaller, we're weaker, we're poor, we're insignificant, we're less capable than we really are. And once that belief settles into our identity, into our core, guess what? It starts to guide our actions and our choices and our decisions. We start to procrastinate. We start to hesitate. We start to pull back and withdraw. We decide not even to try it because we've already decided that we're not going to succeed. We can't do it. I think it was Henry Ford who said, if you think you're going to fail, you will. So yes, fear distorts our identity. Our identity should be in Christ. Let's look at number 6. Number 6, you know what else fear does? Fear spreads and creates negativity. Fear spreads and creates negativity. See, the report from the 10 spies, it didn't stay with them. It didn't stay with the leaders. It spread throughout the whole community. There were over 3 million Israelites that were traveling as a band. And this report, this negativity, it spread like wildfire. It was like spreading like COVID. And their fear became everybody else's fear. Fear is contagious. That's one of the dangerous things about fear. It never stays contained. It moves through every conversation. It moves through every attitude. It moves through every relationship. It shows up in your conversations, your complaints, your sarcasm, your criticism, your discouragement. Over time, it begins to shape the environment that everybody is living in. That's what fear does. Something else that fear does. Look at number 7. Number 7, you know what else fear does? Fear leads to misery and retreat. Misery and retreat. See, the reaction of the people was, it was intense and it was immediate. The people, they started to cry. They complained about their situation. You took us out into the wilderness. We're going to die. They're questioning their leaders. They're questioning Moses. The Israelites, they said something that shows how far fear had taken them. You know what they started saying? Would have been better for us to stay in slavery, to stay in Egypt. They preferred the familiarity of slavery over the uncertainty of freedom. Just thinking about that. But that's what fear does. It keeps us from moving forward. It keeps us stuck. It keeps us in bondage. It has a stronghold in our heart. And it makes the past look better than it was, and it makes the future look worse than it really is. That's what fear does. And it leads us away from the promised land and into misery. It leads us to retreat. It makes us want to pull back. Well, because it's more familiar. We know about it. Now let's take a look at number 8. Now faith. Now we're moving. Faith sees the same reality, but through a different lens. See, faith is extraordinarily powerful. And remember, there's 3 words in the New Testament. They mean the same thing, but each one has a slightly different nuance. You got faith, you got belief, and you got trust. They mean the same thing, but they have a slight different nuance. You can exchange one word for another. With faith, there's emotions. Billy Graham says that's that inner assurance. You just know that you know, but it's hard to put into words. Trust. Well, trust is risky because if you trust somebody, they can fail you, right? And then with belief, well, there's an intellectual component. You can't believe in something you don't even know about. So next time you talk about faith, put in belief or trust. Or when you talk about trust, put in faith, belief. And belief, put in faith and trust. See, faith sees that same reality, but through a different lens. And up to this point, everything had been shaped by fear. And the people were listening to the majority. They're listening to the 10 spies. And fear is controlling the conversation. It's controlling of the Israelites, their thoughts, their emotions, their decisions. It's changing how they see the land, themselves, and the past. And they never get to step into the promised land. They never do. But even with those 10, there's 2 voices that cut through. Joshua and Caleb. They saw the same land. They saw the same problems. They saw the same challenges. Nothing around them changed. The difference was how they saw it. Caleb stepped up. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't say, well, no, let's stop and think about this a minute. He doesn't say, now just wait. He says, come on, let's go. Take the land. It's ours. God promised it to us. He's not ignoring the obstacles. He's just putting the obstacles in the right place. His confidence isn't their strength. He knows that God is their strength, and his trust is in what God already said. See, here's the key. This is, if you don't pick anything else out today, pick this out. It's that fear slows you down. Fear makes you hesitate. Fear makes you overthink. Fear makes you stall. But faith spurs you onward. There's the word spur again. Okay? It moves you forward. It spurs you onward. It doesn't wait for perfect conditions. But faith moves on what God already promised you and made it clear. That's why I always talk about the promises of God. How many promises are in the Bible that you can claim? Over 3,000. Where can you find a list of a resource with promises in it? At the counter, on the wall, in the back on the Connect corner. Exactly. For all of our guests here today, grab a guest book. There's a whole bunch of them up there. And grab a promise book. Because God has got tons of promises for you. Each promise is a provision from God. See, faith moves us forward on what God has already promised, what God already made clear. And now that's what Caleb said. Joshua backs him up and reminds the people that the land is good, just like God promised. And then brings back to what matters. If God is for us, who can be against us? If God is for us, we're going to succeed. See, Joshua is shifting the focus off of the limitations and back onto God. See, and that's the difference. Fear measures everything by what you can see, the size, the strength, the risk. Faith sees all that too, but doesn't let it have the last word. Faith measures everything against who God is and what God has promised. See the difference? Let's go to 9 real quick. Got 2 more. We're going to go through this quick. Here's number 9. See, unbelief can cost us our future. Did you know that? Unbelief. It can cost you your future. And see, this is where the story really hits hard. Because the people aren't listening to Jacob, and they're not listening, or to Joshua, and they're not listening to Caleb. They're going with the majority. They're letting fear lead. And because of that, they never step into the destiny that God has for them. Later in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, it looks back and simply says they didn't enter because of their unbelief. They got out of Egypt, but they never stepped fully into what God promised them, the destiny that God had for them. And I've seen that happen so often because people are stuck in unbelief. They never step into the freedom. They never step into the life. They never step into the power, the deliverance, the hope, the future that God had for them. And that's why this isn't some old story with an inch of dust on it. This isn't from something that happened 3,000 plus years ago. It's forcing us to look at our own lives and ask a very difficult question. If unbelief is holding them back, keeping them from their future, how is unbelief holding us back? What is unbelief keeping us from? You could be right on the edge of some amazing thing, some destiny that God has promised to you. It's prepared, it's ready, it's there. All you need to do is step into it, but you don't step into it because of fear. You might even see the opportunity. You might see the promise right in front of you and still stall, still procrastinate, still hesitate, just because of how you see it. That's the real issue. It's not just your situation. It's not just your obstacles and your options. It's your vision. It's your focus. Are you seeing life through fear or through faith? Look at number 10. Number 10 is where faith starts. Faith begins with new life in Christ. See, if we could fix it ourselves, we would have done it by now. But we couldn't because we can't. Because it's something we can't do, only God can do it. Faith begins with new life in Christ. See, this kind of vision doesn't come from trying harder. Jesus says in the Gospel of John chapter 3, unless you're born again, you can't even see the kingdom of God. In other words, real sight, it starts when your life has been changed from the inside out. It's not just changing how you act. It's changing how you see things. And things shift. They start making sense in a whole new way. It's like your eyes are finally being opened up when you have faith in Christ. It's choosing faith over fear. Because from there, the new way of life, it opens up and you start realizing you actually have a choice in how to respond to life. You can start living in faith and you can stop feeding fear. You can start leaning into trusting God. You can keep from replaying those worries and those anxieties and that depression and start trusting that God is at work even when you don't see the whole picture. Fear doesn't make everything right. No. By the way, fear also doesn't disappear overnight. I mean, God can do it, but more often God uses it as a process because it's that sanctification thing. God will take the fear and he'll take the power away, but it keeps on resonating in your life. Sort of like if you ever look above the door, the entrance door coming in, we get the giant bell from the old church. And I love doing this. I love clanging that bell. Now, when you clang the bell, just go bong and stop. What happens when you ring a large bell? Yes. Resonates. And you keep hearing it long afterwards. It's the same thing with fear. The clang stopped. You broke its power, but it still resonates in our life. Now you can start taking the steps based on who God is, not on how you feel inside. And Jesus gives us a really powerful picture of this when he talks to Mary and Martha after Lazarus died. In that moment of, we talked about this last week, in that moment of grief and confusion, he told them, didn't I tell you, if you believe, you'll see the glory of God? See, that turns everything around. We need to understand That we don't have to see it to believe it. A lot of times we think, well, once I see it, I'll believe it. But you know what? That's not faith anymore. Faith is when you start to believe it before you see it, just because God promised it. So the real question here isn't whether you believe in God. It's, do you trust him enough to let God shape your future? Letting God shape your destiny. Are you willing to step forward in faith even when fear is still resonating in your life? Because at the end of the day, what you believe and what you focus is on, is what you see. And what you see decides the direction of your life. So what I invite you to do, go in your bulletin and you're going to find